The other story we're tracking this evening, Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman has attributed, among other things, the falling car sales to the millennials. Millennials, of course, are those people who were born between 1995 and the turn of the millennials. So they're currently 18 to 20-year-olds or 18 to 25-year-olds. What do we know about the millennials? They like avocados. They dress differently from the rest of us. They're ironic. There have been some patterns we've noticed that's different about them. The US government, for example, put out a paper looking at the patterns, the behavioral patterns of the millennials. They did say, of course, that the millennials prefer not to buy. They prefer to rent. But that's not specific to the millennials. It's specific to the fact that we live in an era where there are actually a lot of startups and innovation that allow us to rent instead of buying. The millennials make less money, incidentally, in America than their parents at the same age. We don't have that kind of study in India right now. We don't have a study on the behavioral patterns of millennials. So we aren't really able to tell whether the American millennials and the Indian millennials function the same way. Now, without that study, one wonders how the government has drawn the conclusion that the fall in auto sales, among other things, because of changing behavioral patterns, millennials. Now, at a press conference, when questioned by my colleague Pramod, the finance minister said that one of the many reasons for the slowdown in the sector was that the mindset of the millennials, who don't want to commit to anything, snowflakes effectively, don't want to commit to anything, like paying EMIs for cars, they instead prefer taking Ola and Uber. Now, that brings us to ask two specific questions. If they're taking Olas and Ubers, which they are, wouldn't Ola and Uber be buying more cars? Because they are cars at the end of the day. They're passenger vehicles. Wouldn't that lead to an increase in passenger vehicle sales, whether it was being bought by the millennial or Ola and Uber? Where is that increase? Also, how does that explain then truck sales falling? And in how many cities really are these aggregate services available, other than the big cities where we use them? What about Ranchi, Satara, Sangli, Chikmagalur, smaller cities across the country, smaller towns, Tier 2 India, rural India? How do we explain the fall there? Listen to what the finance minister said.
How long is the sluggishness in the automobile sector projected to continue? We spoke to certain dealers and they claim that the government itself is taking 28% as GST and 17% as cess. And if there could be any cut in that, it could actually promote the customers to buy more vehicles.
That is a very fine argument to give. I agree. But it's also the truth, and I'm not negating anything that you're saying. It's also a truth that automobile industry in India did have its good times at least 1.5 years ago, till 1.5 years ago, till let us say 2 years ago. There was definitely a good upward trajectory for the automobile sector. Now, that is why I periodically remind that the automobile sector in particular and the components together have been affected by several things, inclusive of the BS6 movement, inclusive of that registration fee related matter, which we have deferred till June, inclusive of the mindset. Some studies do tell us the mindsets of the millennials who are now preferring not to commit an EMI towards buying an automobile, instead would prefer to have Ola and Uber and everything else, or take the metro. So a whole lot of factors are influencing the automobile sector. We are all seized of the problem. We try to solve it for them.
All right, so let's take a look at whether or not the millennials are in fact leading to lower car sales. Joining me on the show is Zafar Islam for the BJP. Meghnad, who's the Associate Editor at News Laundry, Professor Arun Kumar, Chair Professor of the Indian Institute of Social Sciences, and we also have Anjan Roy, who's a Senior Economist and former Advisor Economic Affairs to FICCI. Gentlemen, good evening and thank you for joining us. Meghnad, there's been a lot of comments on the internet about this millennial point, but
Yes.
I've spent the day actually looking for research. The truth is we don't have research on the behavioral patterns of Indian millennials. We don't know whether they're buying or they're renting because we haven't studied it. So if we can't find the research, I'm curious to know where the government is finding this research from.
So if you look at the statement that the finance minister has given, she has said that there is some studies which say that the millennial spending patterns are different, or they are preferring to take like public transport. She also mentioned metro, public transport, or Ola or Uber, etc. But I would love to see that study actually. She should mention which study exactly she is referring to, because even I tried to look for this data and the only thing I could find was the growth of Uber, which has sort of stagnated now. They have actually, today there was a news that Uber has let go of, I think, some 300 employees in the US. So even that company is not doing very well. And as you pointed out in your intro as well, if millennials are taking more cabs, then it should also mean that there are more cab drivers on the road, which means that these companies should be buying more cars. But if that is not happening, then I don't understand that logic either. And other than that, I think, it's a very myopic thing to say that, Ola and Uber is responsible for this, because Ola and Uber is only present in like cities. And if you look at the two-wheeler sales, they are down by 22%. If you look at truck sales, as you mentioned, or tractor sales, that is also a big factor. So what explains that, right?
Yes.
I don't think
Well,
millennials are
Meghna, let me
responsible
ask
for
you
that.
this.
And if they are, the government should prove it then.
Meena, let me ask you this. You seem like a millennial. Are you spending all your money on avocados and toast? Is that why you don't have money to buy cars?
So the thing is, I think with my generation of people, I would say that there is a lot of money being spent on luxuries and indulgences. I can see that everywhere. Like, there are more people going out to eat or ordering in and eating that way. So there is, of course, a factor that more than the previous generation of people, this generation of people is spending more freely on holidays, eating out, and more clothes, and basically indulgence in general, that there is no getting away from it. And I would say that this is a very privileged person talking here. But like in my generation of people, that is happening. But I would also say that, I think as you grow older and as your income increases, which is again stagnant for a long duration of years, I think people are sort of saving, but they're not saving in the way that the previous generations did. Like they're like they're saving in SIPs, they're saving in mutual funds, they're doing all of that. But I would say that it's wrong to say that people don't want to buy cars, because I know a lot of people who do. I just got a car only recently. So it's wrong to say that, millennials don't want to own cars or anything. I know a lot of people who do, just that they can't afford it, or they're saving up to get to a point where they can. And car prices, unfortunately, are super high, and credit is also expensive.
Right. Let me just bring in the rest of the panel at this point. Meghnad bringing in, he's a journalist and he's also a millennial, so that's an interesting cross-section of views. Mr. Zafar Islam for the BJP. Mr. Islam, is there a study that the government can refer to us as to where we're picking up this information from on behavioral patterns of millennials?
Well, if you see in metro cities your own experience, and if you just step out of your home, I don't know with which studies she was referring to, the Honorable Finance Minister, but you also live in city, and so do I. We all know that the Ola, Uber is something has become very useful transportation for all of us, and we all wherever we see that it's best to take a Ola or Uber, because you get a air-conditioned car. One tends to buy, those cars are available, and people do use it. Instead, even if they have the car, they still prefer to use it. And I'm sure that all of us sitting on this panel must have experienced this, what I have just stated, that we have used Ola and Uber. Maybe not every day, maybe sometime, but we do use. Having said that, I cannot, I don't know which study she was talking about. Based on the experience and based something which is so apparent to everyone, I don't know why you are making it an issue. Yes, in metro cities, I don't know how many Ola Uber is is on the road. Every now and then you will see that there were so many Ola, Uber, and the number of jobs have been created. But there, she also acknowledges, and something which you should also highlight, that she acknowledged that yes, till a year or 2 years ago, everyone knows the number suggests that there was a boom for 18 years in automobile sector. Of course, we have seen some slowdown for the last 1.5 years. That slowdown is something which she acknowledges, and she said the appropriate action, the representative from all the different from the industries are meeting the concerned official in the ministry and the finance minister. Their feedback is relevant. We understand the constraint they are facing, and whatever appropriate action needs to be taken, the government is contemplating, and some actions have been taken, some will be taken to ensure that this issue of slowdown gets addressed. But it is unfair. It is unfair to completely ignore the boom the automobile sector has seen in last 18-20 years, and even today. If I just tell you one thing, that innovation is something which is missing in India. Like for instance, MG Hector is a new car. I mean, can you buy this car for us? I mean, for next 1 year, it is not available because the number of people who are willing to buy a new car with various.
No, I'm sorry.
Whatever the.
What is your argument that Indian entrepreneurs are not innovating enough?
No, I'm saying. No, I'm not saying. I'm saying there could be various factors. But what is important, point I'm driving is that what is important that the Honorable Finance Minister very candidly accepted and acknowledged that there is a slowdown.
Yes.
Meeting the representative from the industry, understanding the constraint they are facing,
we're very grateful.
and whatever action needs to be taken is being examined, and something which was important had already been taken. This is the very important message which has been given by the Honorable Finance Minister.
All right. So let me take this back to the rest of the panel. So all of the things that Mr. Islam said are true, including the fact that she pointed out that the millennials are using Ola and Uber, which is why that's adding to a slowdown in sales. Now, I just want to understand where this is coming from, because this is not a WhatsApp conversation. This is not a Twitter conversation. This is not a dinner table conversation where you could speculate. This is the finance minister of our country, who's in charge of the finances of our country, making a statement. So one would assume that if the statement is being made, that it is being backed with study and research of some sort. We don't know yet what that study or research is. Professor Arun Kumar, chairperson and economist and professor of economy, I just want to point this out. So if you look at the last several months, April, May, June, July, August, private vehicles are down about 31% growth year on year in the month of August. Commercial vehicles 38% year on year. Two-wheelers down 22% year on year. Total sales of the automotive industry down 23% year on year in the month of August. Tractor sales have fallen 15% in the last 1 month. Ashok Leyland truck sales have fallen 70% in the month of August. Now, there are no Ola Uber trucks. There are no Ola Uber tractors. There aren't any Ola Uber commercial vehicles or two-wheelers. So, point is that this argument is actually a bogey. It is meant to distract. It is meant to give social media something to talk about. Is that not true, Professor Kumar?
So you're right that given the overall decline in sales across the board in the auto sector, whether it be commercial vehicles, whether it be two-wheelers, whether it be entry-level cars which are bought now more in the rural areas where Ola and Uber don't work. And you know, this is not just in the automobile sector. You have the FMCG sector, you have the core sector, you have, you know, the decline in freight traffic in the railways, you have, you know, a decline in various other sectors. So it's an across the board demand slowdown. But coming to the specific question of the millennials, the question is, in India, are the millennials similar to the millennials in the US? And that's clearly not the case, because in India, a car is a luxury item. So you first buy your essentials and then do the discretionary sale or a purchase of a luxury item like a two-wheeler or an automobile. Now, when you don't have money to buy the essentials, then you'll obviously postpone the sale of, you know, luxury items which are discretionary. And let me also add that in India, the capacity to buy cars, we have to see, is very different from that in the US. There are only 20 million effective taxpayers in the country. and that's only 1.6% of the total population. So when we say millennials, which millennials are we talking about? Only 1.6% of the total number of millennials that are there in the country. The rest cannot afford to buy cars. And we know that 95% of Indian families spend less than 25,000 rupees per month of family expenditure. In that case, these are not the families who are going to be able to buy cars at all. So we are talking about a very narrow segment of millennials in the country, and that cannot be the reason why the car sales have declined. The car sales have declined because of the general loss of purchasing power that is there in the economy. And that started with the unorganized sector, and it's come into the organized sector now. So we have to really look at the pattern in which the demand decline has taken place to understand this rather than looking at the millennials.
Absolutely, and let me also bring in another economist at this point. Mr. Anjan Roy is also here. Mr. Roy, we also have a problem with the sales of, packaged food, biscuits, things like that, soap, shampoo, detergent. We have the last report actually said that undergarment sales have fallen. It would be difficult to, sort of attribute all of that to changing patterns because people can't stop wearing undergarments and using soap and shampoo and showering and washing their clothes. So it becomes a little difficult for this argument to actually explain everything in the economy. Mr. Roy?
The demand for consumer durable items, I mean fast-moving consumer items, this is mainly because of the, see, there are two components. One is in the urban area, the other is in rural areas. The continued rural distress in the last 2 years could be the reason for the slackening of demand in these sectors. Also what has already been referred to, namely the informal sector. See, informal sector provides 92% of the jobs. So if the informal sector puts a brake, if there is a brake on the informal sector, then naturally this will be reflected in the overall demand. I believe that this is mainly because of the delayed impact of the GST. The GST as a taxation system, it introduced a total new paradigm in which it has a inherent inclusiveness. That is, everything is trying to encompass everything into its network. That is acting as a brake for the informal sector. It has remained outside the tax net. It is quite often much below the threshold levels, but even they are getting affected because in the chain, their demand, the demand for their services or products are decelerating. Secondly, what is very important is that 62% or 60% of the economy is services sector. Now, the services sector, I suppose, is decelerating very fast. It has been growing by 10%, double-digit figures. And given its weightage in the overall GDP, unless it grows at that pace, GDP falls.
Yes.
So the prolonged deceleration in the services economy, for example, some construction or tourism or banking and finance, this is also not expanding. Yes. Some sectors are contracting, and naturally there is job loss. So one has to take a very holistic macro view of what is happening. Yes. To really understand the cause of the impact.
Mr. Islam, we have just 1 second, Mr. Roy, Mr. Islam, there are senior economists actually explaining what's going on in the economy.
I have another program.
Oh, but obviously you don't have time to listen. Does the government have time to listen to senior economists at this time, Mr. Islam?
This is very unfair and sarcastic remarks by you. You know it well that there are other programs at 9 p.m. and I am bound to move to another program. So why you're making this statement that the government doesn't have plan and I don't have time to listen to? I have all the time listened to when it was at 8:30. Your program was supposed to start. You didn't start at 8:30, and you cannot make this kind of sarcastic remark.
All right,
it's
thank
very
you,
unfair
Mr.
on your
Islam.
part. Thank you very much.
All right, so that's Zafar Islam of the BJP leaving the conversation. Let me just take it back to the panel at this point. I just want statements from the panelists as to
Faye,
what.
I have a question.
Yes, Meghnad.
I have a question for the economists that are sitting here, because I've been also trying to research on this, and especially the decline in two things. One is, of course, the fast moving perishable items, which is going down. But the other factor, which is with, say, for instance, the auto sales, I wanted to ask them if the businesses who are actually, say Maruti Suzuki or Tata or anyone, is it possible that they actually planned everything the wrong way, did not expect an economic downturn or situation like this? They increased their shifts and started producing in a large quantity. And now that we are in this situation where the economy is going down, there are no buyers. So therefore, they are reducing the shifts, they are firing contract workers, and therefore the auto sector is going down. So is it possible that maybe that the people who are making these decisions in these companies were also wrong, and they predicted wrong, and therefore they are in this situation?
Professor Kumar, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so, it's not that the auto companies planned badly, because last year they were making, say, X amount of sales, and this year and this month they are having 30% less demand. That's why they're producing 30% less. So the stocks had risen in the meanwhile, because what has happened is government was always projecting that the rate of growth is going to rise. So everybody takes a cue from the government. So government has been in denial.
Yes.
And my argument has been that after demonetization, which hit the unorganized sector very badly, the unorganized sector started declining while the organized sector was rising. So the method by which we calculate GDP had to be changed, because we can't automatically assume that the unorganized sector is growing at the same rate as the organized sector, which is one of the assumptions, because the unorganized sector data comes once in 5 years.
Absolutely.
In between, you simply assume that the unorganized sector is growing roughly at the same rate.
Right.
Now, that being the wrong assumption, government was making the wrong assumption. Initially, the demand shifted from the unorganized sector to the organized sector, but now the demand shortage has come to the organized sector also in the last 1 year. And GST aggravated it, as Mr. Roy pointed out, and then the NBFC crisis aggravated it further. So 3 big shocks to the economy for the unorganized sector, and then that has penetrated into all organized sector, not just the automobile sector, as was pointed out, FMCG, freight traffic, construction sector, all other sectors like cycle industry and so on. Everybody is suffering at the moment. So in other words, this is a demand shortage problem originating in the unorganized sector, coming to the organized sector, and we therefore need to have a package for the unorganized sector's revival. Unfortunately, what is happening is the organized sector being organized, it's putting pressure on the government to give it a package. But that means we have no package for the unorganized sector, because the fiscal deficit is rising. And therefore, we needed first to cater to the unorganized sector and then to the organized sector. If you don't cater to the unorganized sector with 94% employment, and there, as the CMI data shows, the workforce has declined from 45 crores to 41 crores. This 4 crore decline is much larger than the decline of unemployment in the organized sector. So we need to first cater to the unorganized sector, to the farming sector, increase incomes there, then the demand will rise.
Yes, and just to extend, to take Meghnad's question forward, because there's also been some comments about the fact that the auto industry should have planned better. So if Meghnad's asking that, could they have made wrong decisions that led to this? This would also, that argument would have to extend, saying that all management of all auto sector companies would have had to make equally bad decisions at the same time for the numbers to look like what they're looking now, which means the guys making tractors, cycles, rickshaws, trucks, passenger vehicles, commercial vehicles have all made equally bad decisions at the same time. But that also, like pointed out, by Professor Kumar, we would also need all businesses in the country to make bad decisions together, which means real estate, and to be fair, that could be argued, infrastructure, textiles, banking, FMCG. We would have had to, the biscuit guys, to argue that this is all bad decision making would actually, would be a difficult sort of theory to extend across the economy. Mr. Roy, do you want to comment on this question?
See, we have been going through a very comfortable period of growth. I mean, 7% plus was the average. So it was very comfortable period of growth, and we had taken that it will always be like that. In fact, in China, it remained like much higher for a much longer period of time. because of various kind of props and incentives they provided. Now the government currently is very much worried about fiscal deficit or tax collection. I suppose government should be less worried about tax collection or fiscal deficit at this point of time than thinking of development process. When the financial crisis struck, the Chinese pumped in huge amount of money in infrastructure creation and several other areas. Now that pulled the Chinese economy out of recession in those years. We had also done similarly. In those days, our deficit had also increased. Some people ascribe that to bad loans also. Now, admitted that there will be some problems additionally, but one has to take a little bit of risk and look forward to priming the economy with large infrastructure projects and particularly rural development, so that money flows into the rural areas directly to increase rural consumption.
I see Professor Kumar has his hand up.
Essential.
Professor Kumar, go ahead very quickly though.
Yeah. So just a very short answer to your question. You know, everybody looks for a cue from the government. And if government is in denial and government says our economy is doing well, growing at 5%, then everybody reads that and everybody plans accordingly. So the government, you know, being in denial was a big problem. When the rate of growth had already fallen to 0% or negative, it was still saying 6%, 5% rate of growth. And therefore, all the planning for every sector went wrong.
Okay.
And that is where even the budgetary figures went wrong, and you did not collect enough taxes last year. Therefore, this year also you planned for the wrong amount of taxes. So fiscal deficit is not 3.4% as CAG pointed out, it's 5.8%. And if you add the states, it becomes almost 9%.
Also, Professor Kumar,
now it's a political decision that has to be taken. How much more fiscal deficit?
There is
no, just one very quick question, and Meghnad, I will give you the last word. But Professor Kumar, the truth is
exactly.
Yes, the truth is that a lot of this is being attached to the current finance minister, Ms. Sitharaman, but she just took over. This is something that's been building for several years. So it would be wrong, Professor Kumar, to actually pin everything on the current finance minister. Isn't that true?
Yes, I agree. The problem began with demonetization, which hit the unorganized sector. And the government has been in denial for 3 years. And she is politically a lightweight. The political decision has come from somewhere else. So she's only carrying on, I think, what has been coming from above. And that's why I said the decision on the fiscal deficit is a political decision. Decision on the budget is a political decision. Not giving the right figures in the budget is also a political decision, which would have come from somewhere else. And I think it'll get pinned on her because she's a political lightweight.
All right, Meghnad, last word to you as a millennial. Is there something you would like to say to defend your age category?
Yeah, exactly the point I was coming to was that, you know, the only way this is possible that everyone planned badly is if the government themselves were giving some figures which were not in tune with reality and how this was going on. But, you know, one thing that I think Professor Arun Kumar pointed out was that there should be more investment in infrastructure, right? There was a gap of 1.7 lakh crore in the last budget, which was then they got like 1.7 lakh crore, which is the exact amount from the RBI. Now, if only the finance minister would tell us that they are actually spending this money on infrastructure investment, which would actually help kickstart the economy, that would be great. But unfortunately, that's not happening. And the other thing I want to point out is that the reason why I think the government is also so happily giving out high growth figures for the last 3 years is because we are in this perverse global competition to prove that we have the highest GDP, which means the greatest citizens who are the most productive citizens on planet Earth. And I genuinely feel that we really need to relook at our priorities about how we count the GDP and what sort of productive citizens we really want. And what the government is going to keep, you know, do you want human development index or do you want productive citizens?
All right, I'm going to leave it there because we've run out of time. But gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us on this conversation. This is where it is the idea that millennials are not buying cars and that's in any way impacting the auto sector sales is difficult to actually take at face value because A, there's no research that supports or that it even maps millennial consumer behavior in India. Two, in that case, Ola and Uber would be buying more cars or their drivers would be buying more cars, then that should have resulted in a spike of sales of certain cars. In fact, Tatas have registered a drop in sales, and a lot of times these cars are Tata cars. The third point is, of course, it doesn't explain why trucks and two-wheelers and commercial vehicles and tractors have also seen a drop, because Ola and Uber has no impact whatsoever in these sectors either. It is not a theory that one can use to describe what is going on in our sector. Moving on now to some breaking news that is coming in, and this has to do with Chandrababu Naidu, who is currently still in house arrest. The Andhra Pradesh police have put a notice outside the TDP chief and former Chief Minister Chandrababu Naidu's residence, saying that his house arrest will continue for the next 24 hours. Both Naidu and his son have been in house arrest, have been put under house arrest for perhaps disturbing the peace. The police have called it a precautionary measure to keep law and order under control. It is an extremely unusual thing for the police to do, unless, of course, it's happening in Jammu and Kashmir, in which case it seems to have been an acceptable thing. My colleague Paul is on the phone line right now. Paul, go ahead.
Well, say under 151 CRPC, the Tadepalli police station inspector has put out a notice for both Chandrababu Naidu as well as Nara Lokesh, informing them that the yatra that they called for, Chalo Atmakur, by the Telugu Desam party, there was a likelihood that the peace and the law and order of the state would be affected, and hence for the next 24 hours the house arrest will continue. Let's remind our viewers, throughout the day they have been under house arrest. Chandrababu Naidu, who spoke to the media, said, you can keep me under house arrest for a day or two, but once the house arrest is over, I will continue the Chalo Atmakur, which is a place in Guntur district where he planned to go and highlight the atrocities that were meted out to the TDP workers according to the TDP. And he said, just by keeping me under house arrest, it's not solving any purpose. Now, this particular notice that was just put out around half an hour ago says for the next 24 hours, the house arrest will continue. And this comes as a surprise because not just Chandrababu Naidu and his son, several other key TDP leaders across the state of Andhra Pradesh today are under house arrest. And in fact, Section 144 has been imposed in the Palanad region of Guntur district. And it remains to be seen how the protest will pan out tomorrow, because today a lot of places in Andhra Pradesh, TDP cadre have been protesting and sloganeering, saying this is a threat to democracy. If the opposition's voice is not allowed to be heard, then what else is democracy, is the question that TDP is asking.
All right. Paul, is there a likelihood that Mr. Naidu or his son would approach one of the courts in this matter?
Well, as of now, media is not being allowed anywhere close to Chandrababu Naidu's house. In fact, it was when this notice was put out that finally we got access to that particular notice. So no word coming in from Chandrababu Naidu's camp whether they would be approaching court or based on this incident.
All right, Paul, many thanks for bringing us this breaking news here on Mirror Now, the fact that Chandrababu Naidu and his son will remain in house arrest according to the police in Andhra Pradesh for another 24 hours. Moving on to a story here at 9 p.m. that personally terrifies me. We've brought you stories on this channel about drug use among children and about how drugs are coming into our cities, targeting children in schools and junior college. Just outside of Mumbai, the Maharashtra police have made the biggest drug haul in recent times. The anti-terror squad has discovered 129 kgs, 129 kgs of mephedrone, commonly known by its street name of Meow Meow. Well, in India, it's called Meow Meow, but you'll know it popularly in the West as crystal meth. Now, I understand from someone who was speaking to me earlier who told me that anyone who does 3 grams or more of Meow Meow or crystal meth will overdose. 3 grams. Consider 130 kgs. The drugs that were seized are estimated to be worth 53 crore rupees. The anti-terror squad got a tip-off and first arrested 2 people with 9 kgs of Meow Meow'or. On interrogation, they led the anti-terror squad to a drug factory in Panvel, where the police seized 120 kgs of the drug. This latest drug bust has once again exposed India's growing drug problem. The Meow Meow drug is far cheaper as a replacement for cocaine, and as a result is finding its way into very young school-going children. Drug peddlers have also gone high-tech and are running underground delivery systems where they deliver to your doorstep or to your home, much like food delivery. Drugs are being delivered to doorsteps of customers on orders that are being placed on WhatsApp and Instagram. The problem is very real. The very same day, but 129 kgs of Meow Meow was seized in Maharashtra. In Delhi, a special cell recovered 10 kilos of heroin worth 30 crore rupees. Now, here are the questions we have to ask. What does this look like? So, if a parent were to go through the pockets or the bag of a teenager or a youngster, do you even know what Meow Meow looks like? What you're looking for? Is it a powder? Is it a crystal? How would you know if your child is using? What behavioral patterns would you see or should you be looking for? And this is just one bust. It was obviously meant for the city. How much more is coming into our city every day? Joining me on the show, D. Banerjee, former officer, Central Bureau of Narcotics, joining us out of Kolkata. Abhijit Kakkad in the studio with me is a counsellor at the Muktangan Rehabilitation Centre. He's helping people recover. Nimesh G. Desai is Professor of Psychiatry and the Director at IHBAS in Delhi. And we also have, joining us anonymously, and we've withheld his identity, is a former drug user who has used this drug in the past. I'm opening the phone lines right now. There is a phone line right under this box. You can see it where you can call us, and we'll have the panel answer any question you might want to ask, whether you're a parent or you're a young person looking for help. You don't have to give us your name. You don't have to give us any of the details. Just call us and we will make sure you get the help you need. Guest, would you please tell us what this drug looks like, and when you were using it, where did you get it and for how much?
Hi, good evening to you, Faye, and the entire panel. Okay, so when we talk about Meow Meow'or or crystal meth, it's usually... Okay, so what was the first question again? Could you repeat it, please?
When you were using this drug, where did you get it from? And what does it look like?
Okay. Okay. So when it comes to the look of the drug, in India mostly the drug it looks like a crystal. It's a small crystal. It comes in little polythene bags. It's in crystallized form. You have to break it, and once you break the crystallized form is where it looks like a powder. That is where the powder form comes in. And it's accessible very easily. Basically, how I got to know about it is via friends, of course. And once I got to know the guy who supplied it to me, he was just one call away, and he should call me to an isolated place, and I should get it. And when it comes to the prices as well, depending upon the quality, a gram always started with 600 rupees. This is in 2015, 2014. 600 rupees till 1,200 rupees. Right now, the cost is from 1,200 till 2,500.
Tell me this, what happens to someone who takes this drug? And what signs can parents or loved ones look for if they're looking to find out if their child or their loved one is using?
Okay. The signs that you can usually see is the person who does it for the first time ends up being really hyperactive. He or she will be all over the place. After you do it for the first time, you get this urge of doing it again and again and again. That is how the sales of, that is how you end up actually being an addict. Because the urge increases so much, you actually end up stealing, lying, may whatsoever come in your way. You would make sure that you either sniff it, inject it, or consume it anyhow, but you would want meow or meth to be a part of your life at that moment. That is how addictive it is. And for your second question on how parents can identify it, it you know you can, okay, so whenever you check your sons or daughters' bags who you feel are into something wrong, they would end up having a small bag, a little bag like a sachet, or if you go through their wallets, you could see their notes rolled up, and if the note is rolled up, you would always for sure end up finding a little white residue of powder in the corners of the note. Your phone screen would be cracked actually, because you need a phone screen on which you can cut or make meth. And you also have your ATM cards. If your ATM cards are actually scratched from, if your ATM cards are worn off from its corners, you get to know that the guy is doing it, or the guy or girl, the person is into meth.
Right. So stay with us, and thank you for sharing that information. So basically, it's a little it's a little polythene bag in which you have either a powder or crystal that looks like rock salt or Ajinomoto, I think.
Yes.
That's what it looks like?
Yes.
Okay. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for phones
Yes.
that are scratched,
Yes.
or debit cards that are used on one side, and any sort of behavioral patterns that we should be looking
Behavioral
for?
patterns, loss of appetite. They wouldn't feel like eating food. They'll get instantly angry.
Okay.
So if you stop them,
aren't all teenagers like that?
Yeah, but doing a lot of meth, it affects the nervous system. So our friend, when he was saying that it makes you really addictive, it affects your nervous system, and it causes a lot of physical and psychological dependency. So a gram of meth, after snorting a gram of meth, you want to do it again and again, and you don't feel like eating anything because you're very hyperactive mentally, physically, and emotionally. And at that time, it takes over your moods. So once the drug is worn off, so you snort a line, for example, and that high is for 15-20 minutes, and that high goes off, you want to do it again. But if you don't get to do it again, you might steal, like he said, or you might, I've seen cases where kids have raped their mothers because they could not get the money for the drug. It's been that severe. 16-year-old kid has been doing that. The drug is so psychoactive. The substance is so psychoactive, it has no medicinal use at all. It has amphetamine in it, mephedrone, also known as crystal meth. It comes in white powder form as well, and it also comes in crystal forms as well. So it causes a lot of havoc in the person's decision-making abilities. They might fail in their exams. They're very loners. They don't like to have friends. So at night, they'll be awake. They'll be outside their house. Throughout the day, they'll be sleeping. They'll only wake up to have their food, smoke if they have any other addictions to those, and then after that, stay awake the whole night and keep their phones off. Not keep them on, keep them off, and then just do their drug for 3-4 days because, like a friend said, it was previously for 600, 800 rupees. Now it's 1,200 to 2,000 bucks, and it's very easily available, like just a phone call away. You know the person who deals with it. It's just a phone call away. You call that person, he drops it at your house. And parents don't even know.
And how old are the people coming to you now? How young are the people coming to you now in rehabilitation?
So in rehabilitation, we have children who are 13-year-old.
Which means they started at?
So they started in their 8th grade. When they were in their 7th, 8th grade. Yeah, 12.
11, 12.
Yeah. That young, they started their drug. They started with alcohol first, then went on to marijuana, and marijuana being a gateway drug, they started using all these other kinds of substances which give them instant high, instant dopamine release, instant happiness, and then away from family, because this new people who supply them these drugs,
these become their new friends.
Yeah, they become.
So any young person who suddenly has a switch of friends, so the person will obviously have a group of friends from school, and suddenly now they're hanging out with new people.
Exactly.
That's a sign?
Exactly. That's the perfect sign. You tell them, suppose the kid comes home and you see them hanging out with some bad guys. And he comes home and you tell him, why are you hanging out with them? No, they're good friends. He'll start defending them. The person becomes defensive, that why are you questioning me? I'm doing something which is right and I'm an adult. So using drugs is a sign of rebel for a lot of youngsters, that I'm grown up. I see a lot of people who've grown up use substance like alcohol and other drugs. So I'm grown up now and I get to choose what kinds of friends I have. You can't tell me.
You can't tell me what to do. All right, we have D. Banerjee, former officer with the Central Bureau of Narcotics. Mr. Banerjee, 129 kgs of crystal meth being seized in Mumbai, around Mumbai. We understand that it's coming from a factory in Panvel. How dangerous is this? How worrying is this for you?
It's quite worrying for us because actually it's a synthetic drug. It was discovered in 1923, but actually it was being used as an addictive drug since the year 2000. But the effects that this drug is having actually on the young people, it was discovered around 2008 in the European countries. It was found that the people are becoming sick and all that. Some people had to be hospitalized because of overdose. And then it was found that they had taken this drug, methadone. Now, after that, it was not a banned drug. In fact, it was a legal drug. In China, it was also manufactured legally, and it was being sent to US. It was being exported in USA, UK, and all that. But after 2010, most of the countries, European countries, including China and all, they banned this drug. They banned this drug, and it had become illegal to use methadone. In India, we had banned it in around 2015. 2015, we banned this drug. So, it is actually not very difficult to manufacture this drug. It can be manufactured in makeshift laboratories.
Yes.
In makeshift laboratories, or generally in factories, if we found some disused factories and all that, or in isolated places, it is manufactured.
Yes. Mr. Banerjee, I'll come back to you with this. There seems to be a problem with the audio as well. I just want to take this to Dr. Desai. Dr. Desai is a professor of psychiatry. I open up phone calls right now for Dr. Desai if anybody has a question for him. Dr. Desai, are you worried right now about the news that you're hearing? Is it worse than it was earlier? Because we understand that from what we've been told, that this drug targets younger and younger people because cocaine is expensive. So this is actually something that would fit into their pocket money. Is this, for you, do you see patterns moving towards younger people or younger children?
Yes, we do. There are surveys in Delhi and Bombay and a few other big cities where the age is actually going down drastically. I am worried, I'm with you. The issues are essentially that it's easy to manufacture. It has very quick effect. It's cheaper than the other esoteric drugs. And it's not very easy to detect, like you said. Although I must say our young recovering friend and Abhishek gave beautiful picture of how you could do that. But yes, the trouble is that the illicit market is now using all the techniques to go lower down in age group. And Delhi High Court's Juvenile Justice Committee and the Delhi government has actually been making an effort to see that the prevention and treatment efforts both go on. What it seems to me is that all education institutions and law enforcement agencies and the health department needs to get together in all major cities to see that these newer drugs don't take effect now. There's, of course, that issue about cannabis being legalized. There is the controversy about alcohol. But these newer drugs, and especially crystal meth, is a huge danger.
Right, I do want to, give out as much information as we can. So, is there evidence right now of this drug either going to schools, inside of schools, or are teachers at this point being educated or trained to be able to point out a problem? 1 second, sorry, Dr. Desai, go ahead.
Yes, if I might say, positively. At least from Delhi, like I said, the Juvenile Justice Committee of Delhi High Court and the state government and a few NGOs and all of us have been together carrying out surveys, have been carrying out education of teachers and also reaching out to students, setting up treatment centers. So one thing that cannot be denied ever is that in the current time, the average age of all drug users, and certainly these newer drugs, is going down, mainly because the parents are too busy. The teachers were possibly till now not very aware of how to detect, and the illicit marketing techniques, as you described, are very, very effective, especially with the technology. It's, as like you and Abhishek said, it's so easy to order them. And the amount of money required is not really so prohibitive for upper middle class or the rich kids.
Right, Abhijit, tell me this. So obviously you have young children who are speaking to you now. Is social media or WhatsApp, the internet, being used for drug dealing at this point?
Yeah, a lot of dark net is being used. There's some XYZ, look here, XYZ app name, I can say. You can type it on Google. I don't want to give it out. But if you type it on Google, you'll know exact place where you will get the drug. You just have to open your Google map. There's this XYZ name, you type it on your Google map, and it will take you to the exact place where you will get the drug. The technology is that tech savvy right now. And kids are using that. YouTube is being used to learn how to how to snort for the first time, how to recreationally use these drugs.
So it's obviously one thing to do, and I'm going to ask this question of everyone on the panel, and I'll start with you, Abhijit. One thing to do is obviously for parents to be able to tell if their child is using. But ideally, as a parent, I would want to prevent. What's your recommendation to parents on how to prevent their child from, because once you start, it's a slippery slope from there.
Yeah.
How do they prevent it?
So preventing is best done by talking with the kids and listening to them first, giving them a space where they can talk what they feel. And opening it up, you know, have you heard about this XYZ substance? It's going all over the news and we've heard it's really bad, you know, and educating him before somebody else tells him that this is something which is really good. You know, it's cool. And if you do this, you're with us in our league, in our team.
Would it be an exaggeration for parents to tell their children that if they were to even so much as touch this stuff, their lives are downhill from there?
Yeah, so a lot of kids learn through experience and through seeing. Like if I'm saying something and if that kid really is like, no, he's just saying it, I haven't seen anyone do it. So, you know, taking them to these places. Like we have a lot of OPDs in Muktangan, which are really eye-opening for a lot of patients who also come on Wednesday and see that these patients go into hallucinations. Who've done meth, they go into hallucination.
They could go into hallucination at any time in the future.
Yes.
They're not current users. This is basically
that might happen. They might also lose their life. They might, you know, their cognitive function might get distorted, and their future might be black. You know, they don't know what to do. So those damages are that thick, you know, for a kid, and for a kid who's 13 and 14-year-old. Before the drug peddlers reach them, why should we not, you know, go to them and inform them that this is what it is and this is what it will do to you. So we want you to make better choices. See, that's what the problem is with the current generation right now. There's no knowledge about what the substance does. And what they know, when they take the substance, they feel a good high. And that's what gets them hooked on. But before that, if they know that this high is short-lived, it's just 15 minutes, after that, it's going to make you addicted to it. So you better stop and tell your friend, whoever it is, that you don't want to do it. That's the battle won.
Actually, young people should also look out for each other.
Yes.
And look for their friends. So anyone who stops being part of a group, who's sort of being aloof, not hanging out with his friends anymore is a problem.
Exactly.
We have someone on the phone line from Delhi. Mr. Ghosh, I understand. Go ahead. We can hear you.
Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening.
Happy to speak to you.
Happy to speak to you.
And happy to see you back on the screen. Thank you very much.
Happy to be here.
Let me get my pocket topic here. It seems like there is ample amount of disposable income in the present-day middle class in the new millennium. And I think this phenomena is a return of the menace of the 80s, but the target audience is different. And we are finding it's being targeting children mainly children. When I use the word still young teenagers, they've got plenty of money. Parents both are working, and they just want to hand over the cash to keep them away from all the worries they have in their life. And these kids are getting into it, and they start with the alcohol first in their thermos flasks and water bottles in school, and from there on they move on to these ecstasy drugs. And as you grow up in your adulthood and you've got plenty of money to run the Ferraris, you go into cocaine or maybe the higher experimental drugs. To conclude, I would like to also point over here, the present menace is also due to the fact, as you've been mentioning, it's a homegrown drug industry. The outstanding output of the Punjab menace that is still undercover has led to the fact that you don't need to go across the border or you don't need the Taliban. You got a homegrown stuff. So you can do it. And still it's not been sorted out and it'll go on. It's a fantastic system. Thank you very much for running this show.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ghosh, for calling us. Let me just go do one round to the panel. Our anonymous friend who's with us as well. You wanted to add something? Go ahead.
Yes, I actually wanted to add that it's a very good topic to bring on. All I would want to say is that from the age of 13 till 17 or 18, the person is very young, is lost, doesn't know where life is going to take him or her. Like Mr. Abhijit said, that education is very important. Parents should educate the children on the right and wrong. It is very important because of what I have learned, it always starts from home. A child being lost or a child having no knowledge or want to explore more, it always starts from home. That is the reason a child tries to find new horizons, to and experiment on himself or herself. I really appreciate that we are having the discussion, and I really want parents to know and understand that if they catch their child doing this drug, stop the child, but make sure that you also ask the child the reason on why the child is doing it. That's all. Thank you so much for having this discussion.
That's a very interesting point, that you should also find out the reason behind the drug use, because if you don't get to the root of the problem, you won't be able to solve the problem. Dr. Desai?
Besides many other things, there are two major streams of scientific facts through research of last 30 or 50 years that I want to bring up here. One is that, as our young friend said and Abhijit said, the difficulty in young age, and as the age lowered down by the marketing techniques, the difficulty is in decision-making skills. As we all understand, if we remember our young childhood and adolescence, responsible decision-making is difficult. At the same time, the science is very clear. Merely providing information or educating will not help. One will have to train the children in being able to resist the temptation, help them gain refusal skills even when they are offered such substances. So that's one thing that we are trying in Delhi, and I'm sure many other cities are trying, but that needs to be remembered. Merely providing information does not help, can actually trigger the problem more. The second major scientific evidence that we have in last 30 or 50 years is this. Psychologically, if a family wants to be careful about children in the household or in the school, there are two traits that actually make young kids very vulnerable to drugs. One is the trait of sensation seeking, and the second is a sense of alienation or isolation. Now, unfortunately, for a variety of reasons that we have all spoken about and we all understand, these two traits of sensation seeking and alienation, a sense of isolation or anomie, are so prevalent in young kids in the 21st century urban India. And so at one level, it's not very surprising that the marketeers succeed.
Yes.
So to repeat, information alone will not work. You will have to train the kids in refusal skills. Second, we'll have to identify children who are more vulnerable in terms of feeling isolated or seeking sensation very quickly.
All right. While we've come to an end of this conversation, I just want to use Abhijit's help here. So is this Is this how the note is rolled
Yeah,
up?
that's how the note is rolled up.
There's no, and this is what they use to snort the line.
That's what they'll use to snort the line, and so the note is it's a bit fat, so they'll thin it more, and what they'll do is they'll take some plastic and wrap it around and burn it so that the note gets tighter.
Okay, so basically if you find a note rolled like this, in this manner, there is no other need for a person to roll your currency note in this fashion other than drug use.
Exactly.
Right, so a note rolled in this fashion with your loved one, your child, your teenager is a sign that you should be worried about. Right now, cell phones are being used to cut lines.
And also if a utensil, if a utensil from your house is missing, is a sign that they might take a plate, because a phone screen might not always come in handy.
Okay.
So they might use a plate, a glass plate, for that matter.
So a glass surface is normally what is used. So if, for example, your young person has a fully scratched up screen.
Exactly.
From going this way.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
This way?
Yes.
So if there are scratches this way on the phone, then that's a sign.
Yes, exactly.
And from what our anonymous friend told us, that if the side of the debit card seems worn out.
The whole card looks very worn out.
From just basically using it to...
You can't read. The ATM numbers are gone.
Okay, and it's not just the ATM card. It could be an ID card.
It can be any.
It can be your PAN card, your driver's license. Any card that is used actually in this fashion, you will see that it will wear off on the side.
Yes.
And cards will never wear off on the side either this way or this way unless they're being used to crush or cut drugs. Right? And we're looking for powder that looks like either Ajinomoto or rock salt. Ajinomoto. Exactly like Ajinomoto.
Yes, exactly.
I hope that helps for anyone who's watching at home. Make sure that you also, and we'll cut this video.
Okay, I would like to add a word of caution.
Yes, Mr. Banerjee, go ahead.
Okay, I would like to add a word of caution. This methadone is manufactured in by two methods. One is by using the methylpiperol with bromine, and another is by using methylephedrine reacted with hydrochloric acid and potassium permanganate. The one which is produced from the methylephedrine, it is very difficult to purify it, and it may contain traces of magnesium. These traces of magnesium, if it is taken, it will cause a lot of harm. It's very poisonous. So we cannot distinguish the two really. We cannot distinguish how it is actually manufactured, whether from the methylpiperol or from the ephedrine thing. So one has to be very cautious. The one which is made from methylephedrine, that is much more easier to
Mr. Banerjee, what you're saying is that a child could,
just 2 or 3 steps.
A young person could think he or she is buying crystal meth or meow meow, but actually buy complete poison that will kill them instantly. That's what you just said. Is that true?
It is just possible, yes. Yes.
Okay. So it's not even a question of addiction.
Some of it may contain the...
It's also a point of the fact that this is a chemical that could be poison and you can't tell the difference between the two, and it could kill you just as easily. I will make a commitment that we'll continue to take up these shows, because I believe that a problem like this is far greater than anything else we can talk about on Primetime News. It comes into your house. It could steal your child from you in the most horrible, horrific way. And information, at least for parents and for teachers and for loved ones, is the route out here. We're going to try and give you as much information as you can. I'll tell you very frankly, when I saw the news that 129 kgs of crystal meth or Meow Meow'or was seized just outside of Mumbai, it terrified me. This could be the case in almost all of our cities. This could be the case. This could be a real and present risk that all our children are currently exposed to. And we'll do everything we can to make sure that you are armed and ready to take this on. Turning our focus now to Jammu and Kashmir. Muharram came and went, and it's day 38 since the clampdown. Mobile phones and internet continues to be down in many, many parts of the valley. The leaders, the political, democratically elected leaders, continue after 38 days to remain in preventive custody. No word has come from either of them. The government says now the communication channels will be reopened soon. It is a vague statement with no specific time limit. The government has also said they've begun a massive public outreach program to restore the peace in the valley. Now, again, like I keep pointing out, we're not going to argue whether this should have been done or how the government is treating this particular period. We're just going to bring you the information. We've decided to give the national platform to voices from the valley so they can tell us what is happening. Joining me on the show, Shakib Yetu is a student at St. Stephen's College in Delhi, whose family lives in Kashmir. Nasir Khuehami is a spokesperson of the Jammu and Kashmir Students Organization, and Sirajuddin Khan is also with the Kashmiri Youth Organization. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us. Let me first go to Shakib. Shakib, what can you tell us about what's happening in the valley? Have you had more frequent conversations with your family? What have they told you?
Hello, hi ma'am. First of all, we are very happy to see you back on television. And yes, I did go to my place. I just returned 2 days before, and the situation in Valley is really very bad. I wish I had words to actually sum up everything I myself witnessed. And I feel short of words at how I saw the state of affairs at my place.
You describe the situation right now in terms of the restrictions. Are your parents able to use their landline? Are they able to use the internet? Do they have access to medicines, to transportation?
Not really. I mean, yes, the government claims that the landlines have been restored, and yes, they have been restored, but not many places, not many people, not many households in Valley have landlines in times of digital age. So this is just the flagship to cover up the failure of restoring the communication blackout in the valley. And about the transportation, no public transportation can be seen visible on the roads. The shops are shut. And I did go to Anantnag. I went to a few medical shops, and some of them did confirm to me that we are running short of medicines now.
Well, let me take the questions now further. Nasir is also with us. Nasir is joining us on Skype. Nasir, what can you tell us from the students that you have spoken to on what's going on in the valley and whether or not, what's happening with the people who are there?
Post 370 abrogation situation in Kashmir Valley and particularly outside, that is quite bad, because students who are studying in different institutions, in different states, different universities, they are facing a lot of problems. Some are running out of money, some are running out of stock, some are running out of essential commodities, as they have no direct or indirect communication with either the side, with their families. So our association is on ground from past 32 years, 32 days. We know what is the actual situation, how we are getting a frantic calls, thousands of calls each passing day. So clearly it shows that situation is going from bad to worse. Whatever government is planning, whatever media is reporting, that is totally fabricated, that is totally concocted, there is not even an iota of truth in the salmon.
Nasir, give us specific examples of families that you have spoken to and the challenges they're facing.
Yeah, they are facing challenge. I got a call from family yesterday. I told them what's the actual situation on ground, because media is reporting that everything is normal. When I spoke to my father, he said the situation is quite bad. There is a complete curfew, complete clampdown. So we are not able to move from one side to the other side, from one village to the another village. There is a complete restrictions. Whatever media is reporting on TV channels, that is totally fake. There is complete restrictions, curfew. No one is allowed to come from their homes. So this actually analyze what's the situation on ground in Kashmir Valley. Right.
Sirajuddin joins us as well. Sirajuddin, I want to understand if you've spoken to your family in the last couple of days, what have they told you?
Yes, I was able to contact with some of my colleagues from Jammu and Kashmir. So the situation is quite tense there. I was not able to contact with them for at least for 10 to 20 days. But I talked to them, and there's a lot of fear in their minds that what's happening, is it a war-like situation, and what will happen, what is the next step of our government. And they are totally running out of some medicals and no communication system, and even they are unable to communicate with if death happens in another village near to them, they get it after I think 2 to 3 days. So there was a medical case in my village that one of the small girls was bited by a snake, and she was referred to Srinagar, and when she reached Srinagar, after 2 to 3 days, her mother came to communicate with her. But she was supposed to prove her identity, that shows our Aadhaar card, are you really her mother or not. So without meeting her young girl, she was forced to go back, and till now they don't know that is their daughter alive or not. So a lot of problems have been faced by the people of J&K, by the students mainly, because educational system is totally struck, and we don't have any kind of communication with our families. Exams are postponed, and internet, I think, which will become a dream for the whole J&K, that there used to be a communication system called the internet, because I have seen this in South Kashmir.
But I also want to ask you, Shakib, if you can tell us this, have the schools reopened? And we've got some visual on the screen right now of a school, but what could you tell us about your village? Have the schools reopened? Have children gone back to school?
No, not really. The schools in my part of Kashmir have not opened. Since I live in South Kashmir, which is considered to be very, very, you know, the hotbed of the radical elements. And then the restrictions there also, they are very, very intense. So the schools have not opened up, even though I did visit a few coaching centers as well, but they are not willing to risk the lives of the students. So I would say that no schools have opened up, even though there have been attempts. My own father, you know, but how they manage now is that he has, you know, he literally grabs the students by their ears to my place and then teach them. And then the youth have taken it upon themselves to open up the community-based schools now. As I said in the previous debate, also that the education becomes the first casualty. For example, I went to the Akash Institute, Srinagar, and I asked them, since my sister used to study there, but now it has been more than a month since the coaching center was open, and they said that we can't open up, we have been threatened.
And
not to open up
shops and markets still closed,
and
Shakib?
then they're not also willing to. Yes, very much.
So livelihood affected, people aren't able to go to work, people who own shops or who have jobs?
No, not really. No one is actually able to, you know, go to their places of work, be it the employees, be it the businessmen, or be it any other person.
All right, we're going to leave this here. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us and giving us your point of view. These are voices from Kashmir students and student association representatives who live in other parts of India, who are speaking to what they have seen when they went home and spoke to their families, or what they have been told when they spoke to their families on the phone. Day 38 of the Clampdown in Kashmir.